You might not know this, but in November of 2024, a movie came out. It's a musical movie starring a 2000s Kids Channel sitcom actress turned pop singer and makeup company owner, and it's seen a lot of buzz this awards season. It might even win some Oscars, to the dismay of many a cinephile. This movie, of course, is Amelia Perez, but Amelia Perez sucks, so we're gonna talk about Wicked instead. Was that bit good? Did I trick you? Or did the title of this video and my excessive Wicked paraphernalia give it away? Hi, I'm Phoebe, otherwise known as Sappho's friend, and as anyone who's spoken to me in the past several months knows, I really liked Wicked. And if the hundreds of millions of dollars it made at the box office are anything to go off of, I'm not the only one. Which kind of came as a shock, because even up through October, people thought it was going to be bad. Like, really bad. I saw a tweet saying it was going to be the next Cats 2019, which is a horrible thing to say about a movie. Why is it going to be so long? They asked. Why did they cast Ariana Grande? Why does Cynthia Erivo care so much about a poster? What was the deal with those dolls? People assumed it would be the next in a long line of awful movie musical adaptations, if not a Cats 2019, perhaps a Mean Girls 2024. And then the movie was released, and all of that stopped. Not only did it stop, it reversed. The public reaction to the movie after it actually came out was overwhelmingly positive. Do you know how rare that is? People were so sure that the movie was going to be bad, and then it was not only good, but so good they didn't want to make fun of it online anymore. That never happens. People love making fun of stuff online. And that's not to say you can't still find the haters, especially when it comes to talk of the various film awards, but for the most part, people seem to agree that it's a solid movie. And I experienced this too. I went into the movie theater skeptical. I'd seen those videos from the press tour of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo clinging to each other with tears in their eyes, and I judged them. It's not that serious, I thought. It's just a movie. Now, I want you to imagine a sitcom-style smash cut to me stumbling out of the movie theater, unfinished Diet Coke in hand, bawling like a little baby. Wicked might be magic. The movie was well received by most, but it found a particularly devoted fan base among queer people. If you know anything about the Broadway show or about musical theater in general at all, this won't be a surprise. Wicked has always had a home with the queer community. It's just that while the musical's gay fans tended to focus more on the actresses, Eden Espinosa's riffs, Ali Mozzi's comedic timing, every single thing Megan Hilty has ever said or done, the movie drew in fans interested in the relationship between Elphaba and Glinda, the show's leading ladies. They certainly aren't the first to read the pairing as romantic, but they are the most. I mean, just look at the Archive of Our Own tag. As of November 21st, 2024, there were 812 works under the Elphaba Glinda tag. As of January 21st, 2025, there are... Okay, so I wrote in my script, there are open parentheses, however many there are, close parentheses, and I never went back to change it. Give me a second. Maybe I already had this tab open on my phone. That's between me and Jesus Christ, amen. As of January 21st, 2025, there were 1,635. In the 2 months since the movie's release, more fanfiction was written about them than in the 15 years prior. So you have this huge increase in fans of the pairing, including Ariana Grande herself, apparently. But you also have a whole new contingent of people who are not fans. If you've read the title of this video, which I haven't actually come up with yet, but will probably be something like,
Yes, Wicked is gay. An exhaustive analysis.
You might assume that I fall into the former category. And you're right, I do. Those bitches are gay. But because I'm also smart, kind, unbiased, intellectual, fair, and humble, I'm going to provide you with the whole picture, answering questions such as, why do people think those bitches are gay? And is Glinda the real Wicked Witch? And even, what actually is Wicked anyway? So, without further ado, Wicked is a 2024 movie adaptation of a 2003 Broadway musical adaptation of a 1995 novel reimagining of a 1939 movie adaptation of a 1900 novel. That's 124 years of history that had to align perfectly so that Ariana Grande could play a repressed lesbian on the big screen. We are so blessed. And if a movie based on a musical, based on a book, based on a movie, based on another book sounds kind of hectic, it's not gonna get less hectic once I start explaining things. So for both of our sakes, I'm going to assume you have like a base level familiarity with The Wizard of Oz, and we're gonna skip right to the book. Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, is Gregory Maguire's 1995 debut novel, and it's a sort of revisionist reflection on The Wizard of Oz, but from the perspective of the Wicked Witch of the West. You know, all those book talk books about like, no, we're telling the villain's story, and the villain is always like some edgy 20-year-old guy with abs. Well, before it was some edgy 20-year-old guy with abs, it was the Wicked Witch of the West. The book is an exploration on the nature of evil and propaganda and fascism, and it's also deeply weird. It's so weird. I loved it. I'm like kind of obsessed with it, but it's so weird. And there are sequels. There are 3 sequels. I have not read those. So again, for both of our sakes, we are going to focus most of our attention on the moderately normaler musical and movie. Wicked the stage show is a very loose adaptation of Wicked the book. Like basically what would happen if you read Wicked the book and then 3 years later your 10-year-old daughter found it and asked what it was about, so you had to describe what little you remembered of the plot without bringing up Elphaba's parents' throuple or the butt stuff, because you've only just gotten to how babies are made and you're not ready for either of those conversations. Is it too early in this video for me to say butt stuff? I probably shouldn't have just said it again. Either way, it's not in the musical or the movie. Yet, Wicked the movie is actually Wicked the movie part 1, so everything that happens in Act 2 of the musical is going to be in what I am affectionately dubbing Wicked the 2V, which won't be out until November. And thank God, or should I say thank goodness, this is a very clever Wicked joke in case you're not familiar, for that, because we all need to prepare ourselves for the emotional devastation that will be Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo's rendition of For Good. They will have to carry me out of that theater in a stretcher. Like the book, the musical tells the story of how Elphaba became known as the Wicked Witch of the West, but this time it's framed more definitively through the lens of her friendship with Glinda, the Good Witch. Imagine me doing like little cartoonish air quotes over friendship. Wait, this is a video. I can just do air quotes. Okay, great. Her friendship with Glinda. The show starts with Glinda the Good addressing the citizens of Oz, telling them that the Wicked Witch of the West, of whom they were all terrified, has been melted by water and is dead. Everyone cheers and sings about it, and then some little munchkin goes, "Hey Glinda, aren't you guys like friends?" And she goes, it's complicated. And then we enter the story proper, told through flashback. Glinda, whose true name we learn is Glinda, meets Elphaba on the first day of college when they're paired up as roommates. I'm saving my gay analysis for a later section of this video, but I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down here. Elphaba is originally only there to drop off Nessa Rose, her wheelchair-bound younger sister, but when she accidentally reveals that she has super magic powers, the sorceress Madame Morrible takes her under her wing and starts tutoring her. And don't worry about any adjectives with which Madame Morrible's name may or may not rhyme. It's a total coincidence. Just like Hannibal Lecter, famously super chill guy, famously normal diet. Morrible tells Elphaba that someday, if she studies a whole lot and works really, really hard at moving things with her mind, she could get the attention of the Wizard of Oz. Elphaba sings about how she and the wizard are going to be magic buddies and everyone will accept and admire her. You know, like when you're 13 and you go to a concert and you think the artist will pull you up on stage and, depending on your specific brand of childhood trauma, either adopt or date you. It's the former with Elphaba, and we will put a pin in that. But Elphaba and Glinda initially hate each other because Glinda's very shallow and vain and popular, while Elphaba is studious and kind of awkward and people bully her because she is green. Also, Glinda's really jealous of Elphaba because she really wants to do magic, but can't move things with her mind like Elphaba can. So they sing about their rivalry, and it's incredibly gay. But meanwhile, there's a sort of growing societal unrest because the talking animals of Oz are being systemically silenced. Elphaba's like a big activist on the animal rights front, so after her goat professor Dr. Dilliman sings to her about this, she's like, well, someone has to tell the wizard about this because he's the Wizard of Oz. He's a good guy. His name doesn't even rhyme with anything ominous. Everyone literally calls him wonderful all the time. It's a song in the second act of this musical, even though she doesn't know that yet. Then we meet Fiyero, a hot prince upon whom Glinda immediately calls dibs, and he tells everyone that they need to think less and party more. And also there's this like loser little nerd guy named Bok who's like obsessed with Glinda, and he's, you know, Doug from Descendants. You know how I feel about Doug from Descendants. If you don't, go watch my video where I talk a lot about how much I hate Doug from Descendants. Bok is not my favorite character, which again is mostly like my internal bias from hating Doug from Descendants so much, and also because I think as a woman, I'm just generally sensitive to loser nerd characters who won't take no for an answer when a girl clearly isn't interested in them. Because in order to get him to leave her alone, Glinda manipulates him into asking out Nessa Rose so she doesn't have to deal with him. And because Glinda helped her sister, Elphaba pulls strings to get her into Madame Morrible's sorcery class. But Glinda doesn't know about this yet, so she tricks Elphaba into wearing an ugly black hat to Fiero's Rager. It's not actually that ugly. It's just kind of like a standard black hat, but for the story to work, we have to believe that they believe it's ugly, so I am willing to suspend my disbelief. Everyone laughs at Elphaba's theoretically ugly hat, but then Glinda has a change of heart. She dances with Elphaba, and they hug, and everyone watching the movie cries for the first or second time, depending on how much Ariana Grande's face in No One Mourns the Wicked got to them. They leave the dance, they bond, Glinda sings about giving Elphaba a makeover, flashes her, puts a flower in her hair, calls her beautiful, you know, normal stuff. But their newfound peace is disturbed when they go to class and see Goat Professor Dr. Dilly dragged out of the room and replaced with a new, very mean history teacher who keeps a little baby lion in a cage. Elphaba gets upset and instinctively using her powers, causing everyone except her and Fiero to dance uncontrollably in the stage show or fall asleep in the movie. So she and Fiero take the opportunity to rescue the cub, and then they have a moment in the woods. Even though Fiero has a girlfriend, and Elphaba has a girlfriend, and it's the same girlfriend. They're both cheating on Glinda. Word of Elphaba's magic spreads, and soon enough, the Wizard of Oz invites her to go meet him. When she's about to leave, Fiero shows up at the train station to say goodbye, and fully gives her a flower in front of his girlfriend. Come on, man. Glinda, of course, is not thrilled by this, and in order to feel included in their animal rights crusade, she announces that because Dr. Dillamond couldn't pronounce her name, she's going to change it to Glinda, which he could pronounce. What an ally. Elphaba ends up taking Glinda with her to the Emerald City, where they sing about how they want to live there together someday, no comment, and then they meet the Wizard of Oz. And Elphaba's like, hey man, you gotta help these animals. And he's like, oh yeah, totally. And also, you should work with me. Because, like, you've always been an outcast because you're green, but if you help me, you won't be an outcast anymore. You'll be my best friend. Actually, you'll even be kind of like my daughter. Don't question that sentence. Don't think about that any further. He kind of tricks her into casting a spell from this magic spell book called the Grimoire, which supposedly only the wizard can read, and now also Elphaba can read it. And that spell gives wings to the wizard's monkey servants, like the flying monkeys from the, you know. But Elphaba realizes that he is lying to her. He can't read that damn book. He can't do magic for shit. And on top of that, he's the one oppressing the animals. And on top of that, he's doing it with the help of, and you're not gonna believe this, Madame Morrible. What a shocking betrayal. If only her name rhymed with an adjective that could be used to describe her ethical character, maybe then we would have seen it coming. Elphaba says, okay, you, I'm leaving. Glinda, you should come with me. and Glinda almost does, but changes her mind at the last minute, while Elphaba flies off on her magic broom and also holds the grimoire. We will unpack this moment of Glinda's in just a bit, because in order to discuss a queer analysis of Wicked, it's so important that we have like a base level understanding of these characters and their motivations, and some people do not. But regardless, that is the end of Wicked Act 1, and also the end of Wicked the movie, with Wicked the 2V presumably going to pick up where Act 2 starts. Leave her alone. She hasn't done anything wrong. I'm the one you want. It's me. It's me. So if you care to find me, look to the western sky, as someone told me. Okay. So, what happens in Wicked Act 2? All my love to that musical. Seriously, all my love in the world. But Act 2 is a little bit of a mess. And I don't know exactly how loyal Wicked the 2V will be to the stage show, but I do hope that some aspects of it are changed for the better. That was another really good Wicked joke. We do know we're getting 2 new songs. Stephen Schwartz, the composer and lyricist for the stage show, wrote 2 full new songs for Wicked the 2V. Word on the street says one is an Elphaba song and one is a Glinda song, with the lyrics to the Glinda song reportedly having been directly plagiarized from Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan. That's not true. Don't sue me. The first part is true about the songs, but everything after the word with is made up. Act 2 opens with an unspecified time skip, and actually, the fact that no one really seems to know the length of this time skip paves the way for many of the act's flaws. Glinda is now officially known as Glinda the Good, and she is serving the wizard and Madame Morrible as, I don't know what the job requirements are, actually. Best I can tell, she's kind of like a pop star, but instead of recording albums, she's a figurehead for an authoritarian regime. And Fiyero is now the captain of the guard, who has taken it upon himself to hunt down Elphaba. Obviously, he's just looking for her because he's, in love with her, even though he's not only still dating Glinda, but currently engaged to her. To be fair, he doesn't know he's engaged until Madame Morrible announces it in public, so he, I guess, gets a pass on that one. Would have probably been nice to let him know beforehand, or even to give him a say in the matter. But oh well. Oh well. Glinda sings a song where she's just reiterating over and over how happy she is and how great her life is, and it's obvious that she's just really trying to convince herself. It's not working. Girl is miserable. When we see Elphaba for the first time this act, she's going to visit her father in Munchkinland. But it turns out that once he learned of Elphaba's rebellion, he had a heart attack and died. So Nessa Rose is now the governor of Munchkinland, and in order to keep her ugly boyfriend Bok from leaving her, she has systematically oppressed all the Munchkins so that none of them can leave Munchkinland. Not good under any circumstance, but over Bok? Baby, you can do better. You should have done better instead of doing this. But Elphaba doesn't have time to deal with that shit right now. She needs Nessa to publicly stand with her and support her. Stand with her how? Support her doing what? No one knows and no one ever will. Another related thing no one knows is what Elphaba has been up to over these past, presumably several years. What's she done to combat the wizard? How has she helped those animals she was so concerned about? We can only hope that Wicked the 2V has an answer to these questions, because the stage show sure doesn't. Fortunately, before Elphaba has to explain any facet of her plan in any way at all, Nessa gets all pissed at her. She's like, you had all these magic powers this whole time, and you never fixed my legs and made me able to walk again? So Elphaba enchants Nessa's slippers to fix her legs and make her walk again. This is something we know pretty much for sure that they're going to change in the 2V, because Marissa Bodie, the actress for Nessa Rose, has spoken about how she doesn't like the way this moment is framed as fixing her and her disability. And she's right, so I'm optimistic about what the movie will do with that. But in the stage show, after she gets the shoes, Bok goes, oh great, now that you can walk again, you must not need me anymore. I'm going to go confess my love to Glinda for some reason. Bok, buddy, it has been, no one actually knows how long, but probably at least a few years, I think. You've got to be over her by now. You just have to be. And although I think we can all agree that he's a bit of a sniveling little weirdo loser, Nessa has an overreaction? And by overreaction, I mean she grabs the grimoire from Elphaba and tries to cast a spell on Bok to stop him from leaving her. But because she has no magic powers, it backfires and shrinks his heart. And because spells cast with the grimoire are irreversible, the only way Elphaba can save his life is by turning him into metal. So he's now a metal boy. Wait, that's not right. He's not just any metal, he's tin. And he's not a boy anymore. This bit sucks. This is stupid. Bok's the Tin Man, guys. He's the Tin Man now. For some reason, both he and Nessa blame Elphaba for this conundrum, even though it is quite possibly less her fault than anyone else in the entire shows. Nessa's the one who stole her goddamn book, and Bok... Now, okay, you all know me. I'm really so nice and kind, and I would never, ever victim blame. That being said, if Bok had learned to leave women alone when they're clearly not interested in him, he would never have gotten himself into this mess. Anyway, Elphaba tells Nessa Rose that she has to go to the Emerald City to free those flying monkeys she accidentally magicked at the end of Act 1. And this does, again, raise the question. If it's been years and Elphaba hasn't even freed those monkeys, what has she been doing? Seriously! Glinda might be out there helping spread authoritarian propaganda, but at least she is getting something done. Elphaba goes to the Emerald City, and she runs into good old Mr. Wizard of Oz, who immediately starts with the hey, come on, I'm just a little guy routine, but in song form. Like, sure, I've lied to people and oppressed all those animals, but the people need something to believe in. And if you work with me again, they'll believe in you too, and you can do good. It's kind of the same argument that Glinda made at the end of Act 1, but worse. But because a man is saying it, Elphaba kind of agrees. As like a condition, she makes him free the monkeys, so that's one thing she does. Activist queen. And then immediately after going like, okay, wizard, maybe you're not that bad, she finds Dr. Dillamond imprisoned and no longer able to speak. So that's the end of that brief alliance. She turns against him. He calls the guards, bringing her face to face with Fiyero, because he's the head cop now. He's on her side, obviously, but he's sneaky about it. So he tells the other guards to go get some water to melt her with, because that's the propaganda that's been spread about her. People are saying that water kills her because she's impure, I think. But it's not true. It's a diversion so that Elphaba and Fiyero can escape. Except, as they're leaving, Glinda rushes in. She and Elphaba embrace because, and everything is great for one moment before Fiyero has to go and ruin everything by announcing that he and Elphaba are in love and they're running away together. And then they run away together. The wizard and Madame Morrible find Glinda, newly abandoned, and they go, if only we had some way to draw Elphaba out of hiding. And because she's not thrilled that both her fiancé and her soulmate just ditched her, Glinda goes, I know how you can draw Elphaba out of hiding. If you pretend I don't know why I did that voice. Glinda goes, I know how you can draw Elphaba out of hiding. If you pretend her sister Nessa Rose is in danger, Elphaba will come to save her. Then she runs off to go cry and journal, probably. The wizard and Morrible do take Glinda's advice, but they decide that a ruse isn't enough. They're going to murder Nessa Rose for actual realsies, and they are going to do this by having Madame Morrible use her magic storm powers to drop a house on her. You know the house, you know the girl in the house, you know all of that whole deal. After Fiyero and Elphaba sing about how much they love each other, and presumably also nasty, Elphaba gets a magic sixth sense that her sister is in danger. She runs off and arrives at the scene just after Glinda has sent Dorothy down the yellow brick road, with dead Nessa Rose's shoes on her feet. Elphaba is kind of pissed about this because the shoes were the only thing she had to remember her sister by, even if they didn't have the best relationship all the time. I actually really hope Wicked the Tuvie gives us more on their dynamic because it's so complex in ways I don't think the stage show really grapples with. Because they're both othered by society, right? Nessa Rose by her disability and Elphaba by her greenness. But since Nessa's othering is one people have a frame of reference for, she gets infantilized, whereas Elphaba is just straight up rejected. They clearly love each other, but it's complicated by the fact that Nessa hates having to depend on someone, so she ends up resenting Elphaba a bit, whereas Elphaba feels the sting of Nessa's rejection even harder because she's been rejected by everyone else in her life. I don't know. It's really compelling. The movie, I think, gave us little hints of this, like more than Act 1 of the stage show did, but we'll see how the Tubi handles it. Unfortunately, Elphaba and Glinda's fight about Nessa's shoes devolves into an argument about Fiero, which is much less interesting, and Elphaba has the nerve to go, yeah, he chose me, he loves me, he never loved you. Girl, baby, you're right, but also, we don't need to rub it in. You were a little bit of a homewrecker there. A little bit. Then Glinda slaps her, and Elphaba slaps her back, and before it can descend into a full-blown fist fight, the guards step in and hashtag seize her. Also, really quickly, during their argument, Glinda asks Elphaba what the hell she's been doing all this time, and Elphaba deflects the question. Even she doesn't know what she's been up to. I feel like Act 2 had no idea how to balance the larger plot of oppression and propaganda with the interpersonal character plots, so they didn't balance it at all and focused only on the character plots. But anyway, the girls are hashtag seizing her, and Fiero jumps in and points his gun at Glinda to make the guards release Elphaba. Imagine your fiancé runs away with your girlfriend, and then the next time you see him, he's threatening your life. Poor girl, Jesus Christ. Elphaba escapes, but the guards hashtag seize Fiero, and they take him to the cornfield for torture and crucifixion. Now, personally, I prefer his ending in the book, where he goes to Elphaba's house, has awful diarrhea in her toilet, and then gets murdered immediately after. But crucifixion is fine too, I guess. Elphaba tries to use her magic to save him, but the best she can do is turn him into a scarecrow, so that he's still kind of alive. So he's the scarecrow now. But more importantly, we get an absolute banger from Elphaba about how she's done trying to be good or palatable and is fully embracing her identity as the Wicked Witch of the West, baby. Yeah. Meanwhile, all the citizens of Oz gather with their pitchforks and torches to sing about how they're going to hunt and kill Elphaba. And Bach shows up and has a verse about how it's all Elphaba's fault that he's a metal boy now, which again is a crazy conclusion to draw, but in an even crazier move, he brings up the lion. Remember that little baby lion Elphaba and Fiero rescued in Act 1? He's the cowardly lion now, and Bach makes the absolutely absurd claim that he is a coward because Elphaba fought his battles for him by rescuing him. He was a baby. In a cage, what battles was he supposed to be fighting? He wasn't getting his own ass out of there. Oh, Bach, when I catch you. Glinda wants to stop them from killing Elphaba to death, but Morrible stops her from stopping them. And then Glinda realizes that the twister that killed Nessa Rose might not have been so accidental after all. But before she can do anything or tell anyone, Morrible reminds her that she's not actually all that innocent in this either. She's the one who gave them the idea of saying Nessa was in danger, and she's benefited from all of this just as much as Morrible. Glinda runs away crying, and the Oz people run off to go hunt the witch. Speaking of Elphaba, she has fully kidnapped Dorothy and is now holding her hostage until she gives back Nessa's shoes. Cancelled. Cancelled. She's literally imprisoning a child. Cancel her. That's so problematic. Glinda finds her and is like, girl, you have to leave. The townspeople are literally coming to kill you to death, and also maybe release the child, please. She plans to tell people the truth, that Elphaba was never evil and it was all just lies, but Elphaba makes her promise not to, because she doesn't want the townspeople to turn against Glinda too. And I forgive Wicked. I forgive them for their incoherent timeline. I forgive them for the fact that they mostly forgot entirely about the animal plotline, because it's here that Elphaba and Glinda sing the most devastating song ever written, I think. It's called For Good, and it's about how even though they're probably never going to see each other again, they've had such a big impact on each other's lives, and how their friendship has changed them, and I don't cry that often when I'm watching movies or listening to music or whatever. Like, I get emotional. I'm just usually not a crier. But something about this song, something about the evil subliminal messaging they put in this song, even the Glee cover of it makes me cry. It's really serious. They hug, and then Elphaba gives Glinda the Grimmery, and then Glinda has to hide because the townspeople have arrived. She hears Elphaba scream, and when she comes out, I'm not even gonna make that joke here, but just know I'm thinking about it. When she comes out, she just sees Elphaba's hat on the ground. Because, she got melted. Wizard of Oz, ding dong, the witch is dead. Glinda holds the hat. She cries. I get so sad I throw up. And then she leaps into action. She confronts the wizard, holding up the little green bottle Elphaba had that was also on the ground after she melted, and is like, the only other person I've seen with a little green bottle that she slept with under her pillow, I, Phoebe, forgot to mention this earlier, was you, Wizard of Oz. And this is how we find out that the Wizard of Oz is Elphaba's biological father. What the hell? Sure. The wizard is unhappy about this because he made his own daughter the scapegoat, well, the scape human, they already had a scapegoat, for his political propaganda campaign. And Glinda's like, yeah, you should feel bad. Go away. Go back to fucking Kansas and think about what you've done. And he does. Goodbye, wizard! Then Glinda has the guards arrest Madame Morrible probably for dropping a house on top of a girl. It's not exactly clear, but she is guilty of murder, so. This scene is kind of hilarious, though, because in the span of 3 minutes, they had Glinda do more for the animals than Elphaba did in not just Act 2, but also the ambiguous potential years between Act 1 and Act 2. And, this obviously isn't intentional. You're obviously not supposed to watch this musical and come away thinking, oh yeah, Glinda was right the whole time, Elphaba was just dumb. But when you look at the things that actually happen in the musical, that's how it comes across. Glinda's decision to not go with Elphaba at the end of Act 1 was supposed to be a flawed one, and like I said, we will unpack that more in a moment. But if she hadn't stayed, no one would have gotten any shit done in this goddamn country. I just think that maybe they should have thought more about their musical. I think they should have considered things more thoroughly. So we go back to the end of the show, which is also where we started at the beginning of the show, which is Glinda singing No One Mourns the Wicked. But now we know she's lying, because she mourns the wicked. She tells the people, I'm going to try and be good for you. I'm going to actually help you and do the good I wasn't brave enough to do earlier. But she's also completely miserable because she's lost the only genuine connection she's ever had. And then, we see the Scarecrow, Fiyero, in case you forgot, opening a trapdoor. And who should come out of that trapdoor but Miss Elphaba Throb? Girl isn't even dead. It was faked. And she and Fiyero run off together, and Elphaba's like, man, I wish we could tell Glinda that we're not dead. And Fiyero's like, no, we can't. It'll be putting us in danger. What do you mean? What do you mean you can't tell Glinda, who is famously good at lying to people all the time, that you're not dead? She wouldn't snitch. Fiyero just knows Elphaba would leave him for Glinda. That's why he doesn't want her to know. He wants Elphaba all to himself. Mr. Homophobe. And that's the end of Wicked, the stage show. A beautiful musical that goes a little bit off the rails. There's a kind of a sort of cost. There's a couple of things get lost. There are bridges you cross you didn't know you crossed until you crossed. And if that joy, that thrill, doesn't thrill like you think it will. Glinda is a villain. Glinda is a fascist. Glinda is the real Wicked Witch. No, she's not. Jesus Christ. Did we watch the same movie or see the same musical or read the same weird book? I know that I'm supposed to be analyzing how gay this musical is, but I cannot discuss the queer subtext in Glinda and Elphaba's relationship when some of you are trying to tell me she's a fascist. She can't be a fascist. She doesn't control the railways or the flow of commerce. For one thing, Wicked as it stands right now is not nearly politically coherent enough to be making these sorts of claims. You can't call Glinda a fascist when she is the character who takes down the fascist regime. She ultimately does more for the oppressed animals of Oz than Elphaba does. And like I said, I'm sure this wasn't on purpose, I'm sure that shouldn't be the case, but it is. Because in Act 2, they kind of completely abandon the animal plotline, or I guess there's that one scene where the wizard frees those monkeys because Elphaba asked nicely, and then she finds Dr. Dillamond in a cage, and then he runs away and is never relevant again. The creative team did not have a clear enough idea of their own messaging for people to come out here saying Glinda is a fascist like it means anything. But even if that wasn't the case, even if they established that during the time skip Elphaba was making incredible progress for the animal rights movement and there were any scenes in Act 2 about that at all, these arguments would still be missing so much nuance. Because the way the show frames Glinda, you are supposed to empathize with her. That's the intent of the creators. And if you don't, if you feel too uncomfortable with her privilege or the ways she's complicit in a corrupt system, that's fine. That's okay. But then Wicked is probably just not the movie for you because it's not prepared to handle these topics in the way you want it to. People going, the real point of Wicked is that Glinda was awful to Elphaba and there was no real allyship there, are just wrong. They're just wrong. That's not the point of Wicked. That's not what the show is trying to do. Look at Thank Goodness. Look at For Good. Authorial intent isn't everything, but it's not nothing either. Glinda isn't evil. She's really not. She's flawed, as many are. She's complicated, as many are. And she makes some bad choices, as many do. But those choices all make sense when you consider her mindset and her worldview from like a human perspective instead of a how can I start discourse online perspective. So let's look at Glinda. Let's use those critical thinking skills I really hope we have, and let's look. At the beginning, she is kind of awful, obviously. The movie makes no secret of that because it's obvious. She's self-serving and spoiled and very, very privileged. She lives and exists in a system which has always benefited her, so she has no reason to look more closely at that system or her own behavior. And she seems incredibly shallow, right? She's focused almost entirely on the way people view her, on her reputation. That's the song she sings, about how important it is to be popular. It's called Popular. We see her get rejected from Madame Morrible's sorcery class, and, we think, haha, the spoiled girl got told no for once in her life. Take that. But that's also kind of our first clue as to why Glinda acts the way she does, why she's so focused on appearances and reputation. It's because she doesn't have anything else. She isn't innately talented like Elphaba is. She isn't a prodigy. What she is pretty and charming and good at saying things that make people like her. She values popularity so much because it's the only tool she has at her disposal. This is all there in the stage show if you pay attention, but it's definitely clearer in the movie because of how movies work. If you're sitting in the back row of the Gershwin Theater, you can't see the hurt on Glinda's face when Madame Morrible tells her she has no faith in her the way you can when you're watching a close-up shot on a giant movie screen. Because if you have magic powers that let you move things around with your mind, you have magic powers that let you move things around with your mind. No one can take that from you. But if the only thing you have is your reputation, you're always at risk. One wrong move could mean losing everything. And that's why the Ozda scene is so powerful. Glinda's taking a huge risk here. Ariana Grande has said about this scene.
I think that's a really important moment for her because her biggest fear at the beginning of this film is probably that exact moment. Yeah. And being disliked or being looked at people in that way. And in that moment, it switches to hurting someone like this ever again. And it's a really pivotal turning point.
She has this insecurity deep down, and it's so important to her that she's liked, that people love her, and that she's the popular one, and that she has influence. And in that moment, it kind of changes, and it's a true example of empathy.
Glinda's friendship with Elphaba is the first real relationship she's ever had. Sure, everyone loves her, but no one actually knows her. There's this great interview with Bowen Yang and Bronwyn James, Fanny and Shen Shen, where they're like, yeah, we're basically Glinda's publicists. We are crafting her image so that she looks good, so we can benefit. And Fiyero is a good guy. He's not using her in the same way that Fanny and Shen Shen are, but he doesn't really care about her. I mean, he points a gun at her head. The only person who has ever expressed any real interest in Glinda is Elphaba. That's the only genuine connection she has. So in that case, why doesn't she get on the broom? And this is the million-dollar question, or whatever weird whimsical version of dollars they have in Oz. Elphaba, the love of her life, who said that, is giving her this opportunity to really make a difference in Oz, to reaffirm this change she made in the Oz's scene and reject popularity and image and all that shallow stuff. And she doesn't. And that's what makes people think that she's a villain or a fascist or what the hell ever, because she does stay and uphold this dictatorship for no one in the entire world knows how long. They do, a lot of the time, ignore the fact that she is the one to ultimately take down this dictatorship, but maybe they don't know about that part. Maybe they didn't look up the plot of the musical. I don't know. Either way, the Ozda scene is important because it shows Glinda risking her reputation for Elphaba's sake. Going with her on the broom seems to be the logical advancement of that arc. But there's a difference between risking a reputation and outright abandoning it. Going with Elphaba would mean permanently giving up not just her place in society, but what she has been led to believe is her only skill. So although it's by no means an easy choice for Elphaba, it's an impossible one for Glinda. Because remember, Elphaba is incredibly powerful on an objective level. That doesn't change based on whether or not people like her. Glinda doesn't have that. And since the system has let Elphaba down her whole life, it's easier for her to leave it. Although there's still a cost on her part, she's still giving up the love and admiration she dreamed about in The Wizard and I, but she's never had that love. She knows she can survive without it. Glinda doesn't. And there's also a level of would it even be smart for Glinda to go with her? Because Glinda doesn't have magic mind powers, but she does have a real talent for persuading people and, the popular stuff. She believes she can do more good from the inside, and she's kind of right. Again, it's a little hard to talk about Act 2 because Act 2 doesn't really know what it's trying to say about these characters, specifically in relation to the wizard and his propaganda regime, but she does take it down from the inside. She does. So if she had gone with Elphaba, if she had given up her status, yes, it would have been brave, yes, it would have been the sort of completion moment of her character arc, but would it have been productive? Also, and this isn't really a fully formed thought yet, but a lot of the Glinda is awful for not going with her mentality, I think, reflects the internet's focus on political activism as more of a who sacrifices the most for the cause instead of a who brings about the biggest direct effect for their cause thing, focusing on grand gestures rather than results. 'Cause in For Good, Elphaba sings the lyrics, "I'm limited. Look at me, I'm limited. But look at you, you can do all I couldn't do." Glinda. Because she stayed, Glinda's able to finish what Elphaba started. They're not working in tandem, as suggested in Defying Gravity, but they are working consecutively. Elphaba does her part, and she helps Glinda find the courage to do hers. When Elphaba sings "so much of me is made of what I learned from you," she's not, being sarcastic. It doesn't work without both of them. Scholar Stacey Wolf, whom you'll be hearing from quite a bit in the next section of this video, points out that you can see this even in the stage show's poster. Only Glinda's eyes are visible. She covers her nose and mouth with her hands, while Elphaba's mouth and nose are visible, but the hat hides her eyes, as if both women are necessary to make a whole face. They complete each other, literally. And because their relationship is the heart of the show, when you interpret Glinda as this awful backstabber fake friend, it all kind of breaks down. Besides, no one's trying to pretend she's perfect. Not a single person watches Wicked and comes away thinking, yeah, Glinda is an uncomplicated hero who makes only good choices. That's a complete straw man argument. No offense, Fiyero. She shouldn't have talked down on Elphaba's power during the Defying Gravity broom sequence. She shouldn't have accidentally gotten Nessa Rose murdered via house. She shouldn't have obeyed the evil wizard for an indeterminate number of years. But the thing about movies, and works of fiction in general, is that they often feature flawed characters who make bad decisions and then must learn and grow from those decisions. This isn't a new concept. I'm sure you've seen it before. If I were director John M. Chu, I would release a special deluxe edition of Wicked with a bonus feature called the No Subtext Cut, and it would look a little something like this.
Pairing.
Come with me, Glinda. Well, I want to come with you, but I'm convinced that being popular and making people like me is the only thing I'm good for as a person, especially because Madame Morrible keeps telling me to my face that I'm untalented, and I'm not ready to give that up. But if I stay here, there's a chance I might be able to use my people skills, which again are the only skills I think make me worth a damn, to do some good from the inside. I'm overall just too scared to give up everything I have, but I admire you and your bravery. I think you're making the wrong decision, but it makes sense and is realistic considering everything I know about you and your view of the world. I understand it's hard for you to abandon what you believe is your whole life, but it still makes me sad that you don't think our connection and justice for the animals is worth it. Oh, wow. Did you like that? Was that good? John M. Chu, you can buy this version of the script for me for $200. That being said, the stage show doesn't really do itself any favors when it comes to making people understand Glinda, and I think it actually lets her down in a big way, because the climax of her character arc happens off stage. So, we know that her primary flaw is that she's unable to give up on her reputation. That's why she doesn't get on the broom, that's why she goes along with the wizard's propaganda campaign. And you have the scene during March of the Witch Hunters where Glinda wants to tell people the truth, but Morrible reminds her of her own complicitness and tells her just smile and wave and shut up, and Glinda runs away. The next scene is Glinda arriving at Kiamako and talking to Elphaba. In this conversation, she says, "Elfie, I'll tell them everything." Elphaba replies with, "No, they'll only turn against you." And then Glinda says, "I don't care." Since when? Since when does she not care? That was the whole lesson she needed to learn, and it just happened between scenes. And the conversation is moving so fast leading into For Good that the audience doesn't have time to acknowledge how big this is for her. This is the equivalent of if they took no good deed out of the show, if we went straight from the guards dragging Fiero away to Elphaba holding Dorothy hostage. And the building blocks are there. We see the beat that would trigger Glinda's change, the conversation with Morrible, but then we don't see the actual change. We don't see the moment where she realizes her flaw and overcomes it. And this would be a terrible decision in any storytelling medium, but in musical theater, it's almost insulting. I love musicals. Musicals are awesome. What they're not, typically, is subtle. Big character beats don't just slip by unremarked upon. What happens, generally, is that they do this kind of weird thing where a character will open their mouth and music will come out. So when a huge moment like this isn't given a song, it can be hard for an audience to recognize it because they expect songs for these kinds of things because that's how musicals work. Even I only recognized it when I was in the shower imagining an argument I could have with a hypothetical Glinda hater because I'm a crazy person who thinks about Wicked all the time. However, I think they're going to fix this in the movie. I think they're going to fix it. Because we know that there are 2 new songs, a solo Elphaba song and a solo Glinda song. And here's what Ariana Grande has said about the Glinda song. It's a pivotal moment in her journey. It shows a side of her we've never seen before. In the stage show, this transformation happens off stage. But in the movie, we get to see her make the decision that defines who she is. So I have hope. Wicked is kind of an interesting double subversion of expectations. The first subversion is that, hey, the Wicked Witch wasn't actually wicked. And so you kind of expect it to be, oh, the so-called Wicked Witch wasn't wicked, but the so-called Good Witch was wicked. And people get so locked into that idea that they don't even notice the second subversion, which is that good and wicked prove to be ultimately unhelpful terms when describing people, because people aren't just one thing. So when I see people saying things like, oh, Glinda was the wicked one all along, it kind of feels to me like the media literacy equivalent of Orpheus turning around right before escaping the underworld. You were so close to getting it.
And a lot of people talk about, oh, which one's the good witch and which one's the wicked witch? Oh, she's actually wicked and she's actually good. And that's kind of nonsense because, humans contain multitudes and people are so quick to erase context and feelings and hurt and reactivity and emotional maturity and how that takes time. It takes time for people to become as brave as Elphaba. No one starts as brave as Elphaba.
Look, if you want to jump through a million hoops in order to interpret Wicked as Glinda was an ignorant, spoiled bitch who deserves to be miserable forever, I guess you can, but at that point, you might just want to go watch something else, because Wicked's not going to be what you want it to be. And it's interesting how people will understand the idea of, oh, the black and white morality we learned was wrong, but then interpret it as the black and white morality is still applicable, it's just reversed, when the actual point is that the black and white morality was stupid all along. Also, the point is that the witches were in gay love with each other. Elfie, get in the cab. Don't be a fool, Glinda cried. The driver was adjusting the reins and yelling at Elphaba to sod off. You'll be all right, Elphaba said. Now you're a seasoned traveler. This is just the return leg of a voyage you already know. She put her face against Glinda's and kissed her. Hold out, if you can, she murmured, and kissed her again. Hold out, my sweet. Before you ask, no. This is not an excerpt from the 200k Enemies to Friends to Lovers slow burn hurt comfort fanfiction I'm working on, thank you. This is a passage taken directly from the 1995 novel Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire. You know, the book that Wicked the musical and therefore Wicked the movie is based on. Yeah, you heard me. They kiss in the book. For real. But Phoebe, you might be saying, so what? You keep talking about how incomprehensible the book is. Doesn't literally every random thing you can imagine happen in it? Isn't there a whole paragraph describing Fiero's diarrhea? Maybe. Maybe there is. And maybe it was really uncomfortable to read and involved the adjective wetly. But that's not important. Glinda and Elphaba kiss on the mouth. It's right there, in the book. But Phoebe, you might be saying again, louder and more persistently, that's the book. Unless you've been massively burying the lead here, they didn't put that part in the musical or movie, just like they didn't put in Elphaba's parents' throuple, or the time Elphaba became a nun, or the time she bashed Madame Morrible's skull in with a marble statue. Although, I don't know, maybe they should have kept that last one. And yes, you do have a point. They do not kiss in the musical, or in the movie. Yet. John M. Chu, if you're watching this, there's still time for part 2 reshoots. Also, if you're watching this, please give us Wicked Witch of the East on the official soundtrack, please. I'll Venmo you $30. But even though their relationship in the musical is not technically queer in a romantic sense, I would argue that it's still queer in a subversive sense, especially in, how it plays with typical theater conventions. To prove my point, I am about to recite to you, slam poetry style, some lyrics to the song, What Is This Feeling? I am doing this because I cannot sing and I don't think I can legally play the music for you. What is this feeling? So sudden and new. I felt the moment I laid eyes on you. My pulse is rushing. My head is reeling. My face is flushing. What is this feeling? Now obviously, these lyrics are purposefully misleading. The feeling confusing these two girls is meant to sound like a crush, and the joke of it is that it's not. It's loathing. But even so, the song is still, really gay. In her paper, Defying Gravity, Queer Conventions and the Musical Wicked, yes, I am bringing out the academic sources because this is serious, Stacey Wolf writes, the lyrics describe perfectly the feeling of falling in love, and yet the refrain turns to their true feeling, loathing. Although it is not actually a queer love song, the numbers' energy and the mutual engagement of the women, who sing much of the song in unison, link them passionately and set up the audience to be teased by queer potential throughout the show. In addition, the number is choreographed as approach and avoidance. The actors move close and then back off. They twirl around each other like magnets. Like many romantic couples in musical theater, Elphaba and Glinda at once hate each other and are irresistibly drawn to each other. What Is This Feeling is a love song in all but technicality. And Wolf goes on to write that Schwartz plays with the audience's expectations in the musical's first duet and renders the song doubly queer. First, the song seems to defy conventions of genre because it sounds like an actual love song. And second, to defy conventions of gender because it seems to be a love song between two women in the resolutely heterosexual form of the musical. For anyone who has any experience with theater, the idea of this resolutely heterosexual form of the musical might raise a few eyebrows, but Wolf is referring here to the traditional straight romance at the center of most Golden Age musicals. Wicked takes that romance and supplants it with Elphaba and Glinda's relationship, using them to fill the narrative place of a romance plot. But Phoebe, you say again, voice somehow even more high-pitched than before. Wicked has a romance plot, a straight one, kind of two straight ones. What about Fiyero? And to that, I say, in the kindest way possible, Fiyero is nothing. He's not nothing. He's, I think, a very interesting character, and Jonathan Bailey always slays. But in terms of the story as a whole, he's not that big a deal. Here's what our good friend Wolf has to say about him. Even the men who have played Fiyero know that the character merely exists to foreground the women's strong connection and attachment. Norbert Leo Butz, for example, said that the real love story is between the two ladies, so who is this guy became the overwhelming question. And David Ayers observed that Fiyero is a vehicle to tell the story of the two women. Compared to Glinda and Elphaba, Fiyero is inconsequential. I mean, look, and I am, full disclosure, I am 100% stealing this joke from Twitter. Wicked the 2V is called Wicked for Good, not Wicked as long as you're mine. Fiyero is a nothing burger. Glinda and Elphaba are a 5-course meal. In fact, there's a way in which the love triangle with Fiyero serves to strengthen them as a romantic pairing. In Between Men, Eve Sedgwick describes Gerard's erotic triangle as it pertains to queerness. She writes, Gerard finds many examples in which the choice of the beloved is determined in the first place not by the qualities of the beloved, but by the beloved's already being the choice of the person who has been chosen as a rival. In fact, Gerard seems to see the bond between rivals in an erotic triangle as being even stronger, more heavily determinant of actions and choices than anything in the bond between either of the lovers and the beloved. Between Men is about men, but this principle applies here too. As we've already established, the bond between Elphaba and Glinda is infinitely stronger than the bond between Elphaba and Fiyero, and obviously also between Glinda and Fiyero. And I think if we want to be really controversial, we can try to argue that Elphaba's feelings for Fiyero were, in Cedric's words, determined by his already being the choice of the person who has been chosen as a rival. Take I'm Not That Girl, which seems like it's about Fiyero, but when you look at the lyrics, you realize it's really not. When she sings about him, the words are all vague or hypothetical. Hands touch, eyes meet. He could be that boy. She sees Fiyero as a placeholder for everything she can't have. She's not the girl who gets that fairy tale romance, but Glinda is. All the lyrics describing Glinda are hyper-specific. Blithe smile, lithe limb, she who's winsome. These are not adjectives you just pull out of your pocket. Girl is paying attention. And we get a physical description too. Gold hair with a gentle curl. The only things the lyrics tell us about Fiyero are that he has hands, he has eyes, and he loves Glinda. And the third thing isn't even true. He doesn't love her. But Elphaba thinks he does, and that's why she loves him. He only exists in the song as a concept. The concept of being loved, of being wanted, of having a relationship like that. She doesn't want him, she wants what he represents. And he only represents those things because he's dating Glinda, someone Elphaba both cares deeply about and is deeply jealous of. Glinda also doesn't actually want Fiyero. She too just wants what he represents, but he represents different things to her, and I have a whole spiel about that later, so just put a pin in that for now. Now, am I saying Elphaba and Fiyero's relationship isn't real and it's all just Elphaba's projection of her loneliness and confusing feelings for Glinda? I mean, no. As much as I would like to, I don't know if I can really make a solid case for that, because sure, they barely spend any time together at Shiz, and then he doesn't see her for years, and then they kind of instantly run off together, even though they don't actually know each other that well, and who's to say how long their relationship will last, but the show clearly wants us to believe that they're in love, and the timeline and logistics are wishy-washy at best, so whatever. I'll let that slide. What I am going to argue is that the origin of Elphaba's feelings for Fiyero are influenced by her feelings for Glinda, both her envy and her love. And this only reinforces the second part of the Sedgwick quote about the bond between the rivals being stronger than either of their bonds with the beloved, which we already know, I just did a whole bit on that. It's their story. Even if you interpret it as platonically, it's Glinda and Elphaba's love story. But there's still this whole idea floating around of, well, which of them is good for Elphaba? And to that, I say, huh? Fiyero may seem like a better person than Glinda. He may be a better person than Glinda. But that is because his role in the story does not allow for the complexities Glinda's requires. He has a significantly smaller part, both musically and narratively, so his flaws are smaller to match. So yes, you can say Fiyero is morally better than Glinda, but some people use that to argue that his relationship with Elphaba is more important than Glinda's. And to that, I say, have you ever watched any romance movie ever? The girl always chooses the dangerous, f***ed-up bad boy over the nice, normal, stable guy because love is about more than just objective qualities. And Wicked takes care to show how Glinda and Elphaba's connection is deeper than Elphaba and Fiyero's ever is. I mean, look at the exchange from the Ozdust scene.
I'll say this much. She doesn't give a twig what anyone thinks.
Of course she does. She just pretends not to.
Fiyero may love Elphaba, but he just doesn't see her the way Glinda does. And even individually, Elphaba and Glinda read as queer. From the start, Elphaba's an outcast. She's different from her peers, ostracized for something she can't control. And interestingly enough, her green skin is a direct result of her mother's affair with Jeff Goldblum, tying her otherness to sexual deviancy and relationships outside the cultural norm. Elphaba herself is a blank slate outcast, designed to be relatable to anyone who's experienced marginalization, whether that's Idina Menzel's experience as a Jewish woman or Cynthia Erivo's as a black one. As producer Mark Platt said, "We all have a green girl inside us." And then, as he said when he was doing the Dear Evan Hansen movie, if you don't cast my special baby boy as a 16-year-old, even though he looks like a depressed insurance broker going through a vicious custody battle, I will literally beat you to death with a hammer. I'm Mark Platt. Regardless of the specifics, Elphaba is very much othered. There's no way for her to hide her difference, so she puts on a show of embracing it. She dresses in all black, puts no effort into making friends, and has a prepared snarky spiel ready to give anyone who questions her virgincy. When Glinda tricks her into wearing a hideous hat to the Ozdust ballroom, she reacts by performing a solo, silent dance number as a big f*** you to anyone who rejected her. She comes off as indifferent about her image, but it's all an act. It's a ruse, and the only person who doesn't fall for it is Glinda. As I just mentioned, she sees through the front even when Elphaba's love interest doesn't. And she's right. In The Wizard and I, Elphaba's I Want song, she fantasizes about being loved and celebrated by the people who currently scorn her. She imagines the wizard offering to degreenify her, but immediately dismisses it with the lyric, "And no, of course that's not important to me," maintaining her facade of indifference even within the privacy of her own song. She hasn't fully come to terms with her own desire to be accepted, but Glinda recognizes it instantly. And let's talk about Glinda. Even though we've already talked quite a bit about Glinda, let's talk about her some more, specifically through the lens of queerness, specifically through the lens of lesbianism and compulsory heterosexuality. Really good drinking game for this video. Take a shot every time I look at something through the lens of something else, or use any number of poor synonyms to express that idea. We already know that Glinda's only source of self-worth or validation is her image, and this translates to her relationship with Fiyero, too. She pursues him not because of a deep interest in his internal world, but because he's a conventionally attractive, wealthy prince. And dancing through life, they sing to each other, "You're perfect, so we're perfect together," signaling through the audience's understanding of genre conventions that they are neither perfect as individuals nor a good fit for each other. Glinda clings to Fiyero even when it's clear their relationship is not working, because she has this image in her mind of them as a perfect couple, of herself as a perfect person. This may seem shallow, but as we discussed in detail earlier, and by discussed I mean I said and you listened, her focus on appearance is born out of a deep loneliness and insecurity. This behavior makes even more sense when you read Glinda as a lesbian experiencing compulsory heterosexuality. For those of you who aren't chronically online or haven't attended a women's college, comphet is the idea that heterosexuality and patriarchy are so deeply ingrained into society that many lesbians are unable to recognize or come to terms with their sexuality. Because women are told more or less from birth that their ultimate purpose in life is to find a husband and be a mother, they internalize those ideas and force an attraction to men that isn't truly there. You may have heard lesbians say it was easier for them to accept their attraction to women than accept their lack of attraction to men, and this is because society has always tied being a woman to being with a man, so in coming to terms with their lesbianism, they are breaking what they have been taught is the cardinal rule of womanhood. By giving up forever on the future you've been taught you need, you are placing yourself definitively into the category of outsider or other. Hey, wait a minute. Outsiders? Others? This is all sounding very familiar. Everything we've already said about Glinda's character tracks perfectly with his interpretation of her. She pursues Fiyero not out of attraction, but because he is everything she thinks she should want. She displays a comical degree of femininity, wearing exclusively pink and doing a dramatic hair toss at every opportunity. When I watch her, I remember how I forced myself to wear dresses literally every single day in 4th and 5th grade, because on a subconscious level I thought it would make me normaler, I guess. It didn't work. I was a very weird child. And I didn't even know I was gay then. I just knew there was something other girls had that I didn't, so I was overperforming girliness to compensate for that. And look at me now. And I'm not saying Glinda's gonna come out of the closet, transfer to Smith, and start serving foot realness or whatever, but I am saying there's a level to which her femininity can be interpreted as a performance, in the same way her whole life is a performance. The first time we see her do something actually genuine is at the Ozdust, where she puts her reputation at risk by literally dancing with another woman. And when she and Elphaba do become friends, they are, okay, so you know how in my last video about Disney's Descendants franchise, I kept a tally mark of every time Mal and Evie held hands? I couldn't even try to do that for Wicked, because those bitches never let go of each other. Not once. One short day is literally the two of them walking around the Emerald City while holding hands and fantasizing about how they're going to move there someday, which is what every gay teenager does the first time they visit New York. And not to mention, the flower she puts in Elphaba's hair during Popular is the exact same one Fiyero put in her hair during Dancing Through Life, in an explicitly romantic context. There's also the matter of the hat. When preparing to go to the Ozdust Ballroom, Fanny and Shen Shen find a black hat in Glinda's closet. Her closet? Okay, it might be less of a closet and more of a weird little standing wardrobe trunk thing, but it's close enough to a closet for the bit to work. They ask her what it is, and she hesitates before dismissing it as just something ugly her grandmother made, so they tell her to give it to Elphaba as a prank. But Glinda chose to bring the hat to college, and she doesn't condemn it until she realizes her friends think it ugly. The screenplay even directly notes her embarrassment in the scene. Glinda doesn't hate the hat. She loves the hat, in private, unlike Elphaba, who wears it with pride to the point it becomes one of her defining features. What Glinda hides about herself, Elphaba puts on public display. Is this intentional? Is Glinda's hat a definitive symbol of her queerness? Like, probably not. I'm reaching so hard here. But the thing about movies is that sometimes it's fun to look at symbols in them and think about what they could mean, even if it's not definitively 100% what the creators were going for. Okay? The curtains are not just blue, and that hat is gay. And in Defying Gravity, the thing Glinda is too afraid to do is run away with another woman. Both there and at the Ozdust, we see real risk in her relationship with Elphaba. Compare that to her relationship with Fiyero, which is safe but deeply unfulfilling. She spends a whole number convincing everyone except herself that she's happy, and her ending is much the same, smiling and waving and singing about how great it is that the only person she truly loves is gone. She's forced to retreat further into her performance to the point it affects the very style of her singing. Stacey Wolf, again, my idol, my queen, my best friend, says this about No One Mourns the Wicked. Unusual for musical theater, this first number does not accurately reflect Glinda's true character, but instead stages a performance of a performance in her role as a public figure. Sung in a significantly higher register than any other song in the show, this song is Glinda's only true soprano number. Its unusual tessitura confirms the song's status as public display, as performance. Even though she is now much more sincere in her commitment to do good, she is still devastatingly lonely. There is a gaping Elphaba-shaped hole inside her, and the fact that no one can ever know about their relationship only isolates her further.
She has this newfound opportunity of being this famous person, this figure, this princess that they all look to for hope and for goodness, and she's like, where's mine, though? I need some hope, and I need that validation from you guys that you're getting from me, but it's so empty without her.
Jesus Christ. Okay, good morning to you too, Ariana Grande. Also, side note, Wolf refers to No One Mourns as Glinda's only true soprano number, which it is, but she has moments of going into that super soprano-y voice throughout the show, and they're all moments of performance, of fakeness. In What Is This Feeling, we have the These Things Are Sent to Try Us, where she's pretending to be all nice and sweet to her classmates, and we have it again at the end of Thank Goodness. Most of that song is done in normal voice. Sorry, if any trained singers are watching this, I don't know your words. Which implies that on some level she is being genuine. She's trying to be happy, trying to enjoy her role and celebrate with the people, but it doesn't work. Then we get to There Are Bridges You Cross You Didn't Know You Crossed Until You've Crossed, which is certainly a controversial line in that it's kind of mechanically bad, but I could defend it. I think it works really well for Glinda's character. I'm not going to right now, because that would be a side note to my side note and we'd be on a completely different scale, but I could. It works. I love that line. And after that, Glinda realizes she's being too genuine, that she's not being the perfect public figure they need her to be. So at the very end of that song, she retreats back into that soprano. She comes to the realization that she can't be genuine with these people if she wants to maintain her status, so she puts up even more of a defense between her real feelings and everyone else. And that separation of herself and her public persona is complete by no one mourns, which is why the number is completely soprano. Okay, side note over. I just had to talk about Thank Goodness, because if I go more than a week without talking about Thank Goodness, I literally die. I'm not kidding, I do. I feel a slight tapping on my shoulder. I ignore it. I feel more tapping on my shoulder, a little bit harder this time. I ignore it again. I feel a final, violent tapping on my shoulder, so I sigh and turn around. It's you, my dear viewers, or at least the hypothetical version of you I have constructed to argue against. But Phoebe, you whine, much like a petulant child, do you really have to make everything so gay all the time? I mean, can't girls just be friends? We've heard it time and time again. Wicked isn't actually gay, they're just really good friends. Of course they're holding hands and cuddling all the time. That's how best friends act. Of course they're gazing into each other's eyes while lying on a bed. That's how best friends act. Of course Ariana Grande described them as soulmates. That's how best friends talk about each other. When they kiss in the book, it's just a platonic kiss. Stop trying to make Wicked gay and go watch real queer movies. And I guess there's a grain of truth to this. Not like that much truth, but a grain nonetheless. If I said that Ariana Grande's description of Glinda and Elphaba as soulmates, or that time she said they fall completely in love with each other, or the countless times people involved with the show have described it as a love story between the two girls, was definitive proof that they're in gay love with each other, it would be a pretty bad faith argument. Straight girls are known far and wide for being comically affectionate, to the point where a girl can comment, "You are the most gorgeous human being I have ever seen, and I am literally in love with you, and I literally want to marry you and have your babies and live together forever, and I mean this romantically," on another girl's Instagram post, and they'll mean it completely platonically. But also, I mean, gay people exist. Sometimes girls are gay and are in love with their best friends. So how do we know what's what? How do we tell the difference between saying they're literally soulmates platonically and saying they're literally soulmates romantically? What's the line between media and queer media, and why is that line especially blurry when it comes to women? Well, in order to answer that question, we're going to take a look not at Wicked the movie, not at Wicked the musical, not at Wicked the book, but at the 19th century historical concept of romantic friendships between women. I bet you were all getting real comfortable, weren't you? She's not like those video essayists, you thought. She's only cited one academic paper so far, and it was a paper directly related to the media she was discussing, and she didn't bring in random historical sources to sound smart. Ha ha, ha ha ha. In the female world of love and ritual, relations between women in 19th century America, Carol Smith Rosenberg writes about 1800s era female friendships so close that even the most queer-baity of straight girls would raise an eyebrow. Is that problematic? Should I not say that? I'm sorry, straight girls. I'm sorry. She provides quotes from letters written between two women named Molly and Helena, who met at college in 1868. I will now read some of those quotes to you. I love her as wives do love their husbands, as friends who have taken each other for life, and I believe in her as I believe in my God. You know, dear Helena, I really was in love with you. It was a passion such as I had never known until I saw you. I don't think it was the noblest way to love you. And this one is in a letter addressed to Helena's fiancé. Do you know, sir, before you came along, I believe she loved me almost as girls love their lovers. I know I loved her so. Pretty damn gay, by today's standards. But Smith-Rosenberg argues that due to the nature of 19th century society, these relationships were socially acceptable and fully compatible with heterosexual marriage. Because women and men of that time lived most of their young lives completely separate, this level of intensity between women was pretty normalized. She writes that 18th and 19th century women lived in emotional proximity to each other. Friendships and intimacies followed the biological ebb and flow of women's lives. Marriage and pregnancy, childbirth and weaning, sickness and death involved physical and psychic trauma which comfort and sympathy made easier to bear. Intense bonds of love and intimacy bound together these women who, offering each other aid and sympathy, shared such stressful moments. You can see a similar line of thinking in those who rally in opposition to the romantic interpretation of Wicked. Well, they say, girls are always super close like that. Elphaba and Glinda are just two friends. Two good friends. Two best... Oh my god. How does anyone put up with me? Jesus Christ. Anyway, Smith-Rosenberg advises against the use of terms like queer to describe these women, saying, the 20th century tendency to view human love and sexuality within the dichotomized universe of deviance and normality, genitality and platonic love, is alien to the emotions and attitudes of the 19th century and fundamentally distorts the nature of these women's emotional interaction. Essentially, they didn't view sexuality then in the same way we do now, so applying our modern labels to people of historical times is stupid and bad. Because these relationships were apparently perfectly normalized, it's hard to label them gay like you might today. It's unclear how heteronormative Oz is, but Wicked as a media definitely was created in today's dichotomized universe of deviance and normality, so I'd argue this doesn't really apply here. But beyond that, I think there are some oversights in the claim's premise. In her paper, Something More Tender Still Than Friendship, Romantic Friendship in Early 19th Century England, Lisa Moore poses a reframing of Smith-Rosenberg's argument. She says that while it is true we can't map our modern ideas of sexuality onto historical relationships, we also can't really deny that there were people whose lived experiences did align with labels such as homosexual, bisexual, etc. And there were some female-female relationships that weren't socially acceptable and fully compatible with heterosexual marriage, as Smith-Rosenberg puts it. There were some that fell outside the social norms, considered strange and dangerous even by standards that allowed letter exchanges such as, "It was a passion I had never known until I saw you," slide. She uses the example of Anne Lister, a 19th century woman who definitely had relationships with other women, like, for sure. If you've ever heard of the BBC HBO TV show Gentleman Jack, the super gay one, that was based off of her life. Unfortunately, that show was cancelled after 2 seasons. Super weird. Glad they didn't do that with any other lesbian shows. Oh. Wait. In her diaries, Lister wrote about her relationships with women and her struggles with her own sexuality. And significantly, Moore writes, Lister herself is skeptical of the theory that romantic friendship was completely determined by the ideology of female sexual passivity. When Marianne writes to ask her, after a visit to the famous ladies of Llangollen, whether she thinks the relationship had always been platonic, Lister records the following reply. I cannot help thinking that surely it was not platonic. Heaven forgive me, but I look within myself and doubt. I feel the infirmity of our nature and hesitate to pronounce such attachments uncemented by something more tender still than friendship. For Lister, sexual love between women was not only possible, but also likely in the context of romantic friendship. So here we do have real evidence of not only a 19th century woman who more or less fits our modern definition of super-duper lesbian, we have her own comments on the ways in which some romantic friendships may not have been as compatible with heterosexual marriage as they may have appeared. Another example Moore gives is the 1801 novel Belinda by Maria Edgeworth. She discusses the character of Harriet Freke, who dresses in men's clothing, advocates for women's rights, and orchestrates a pistol duel between 2 women. This duel goes awry, and one of the women is wounded by her own pistol backfiring, because, she loaded it improperly, because she's a woman, and these are improper behaviors for women. In the sort of female friendship love triangle the protagonist has to deal with, Harriet Freke is unequivocally condemned as the bad choice. As Moore writes, the force of this scene depends upon the centrality of the novels and the period's anxieties about how improper female friendship can lead women to usurp the positions of men, resulting not only in confused gender and sexual boundaries, but also in personal and political violence. These anxieties underscore simultaneous necessity and impossibility of policing the boundaries of romantic friendship. For although, on one hand, such a friendship could be argued to guarantee female virtue because it fixed women's desires and attentions upon one another rather than upon possibly sexual relationships with men, on the other hand, female friendship could also result in a dangerous female autonomy from men, even an attempt to take the place of men, in this case by dressing like them or dueling. So what we're looking at here is not the relationships in a vacuum, but how they existed within or rebelled against their society. And in Wicked, Glinda and Elphaba's relationship clearly rebels against the societal structure of Oz. You have a beloved woman of high status, content to live her whole life without questioning the injustices of society, forming a deep and all-consuming friendship with an outcast determined to change the social order. And it is only through their combined efforts, Glinda getting rid of the evil politicians and Elphaba helping those 3 monkeys that one time, that society does change. For the better. Even if you choose not to read their relationship as queer in a romantic sense, it is still queer in the sense that it fundamentally disrupts the norms of the world they live in. And on a meta level, it's queer in the sense that it presents these 2 women as the central relationship of the show, thereby disrupting the conventions of the genre. I really hope this makes sense. God, I feel like that meme of the guy with the post-it boards and the string going like, ah. Like, trust me, guys, this 1801 novel is deeply relevant to my discussion of this 2024 movie. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that when you ask me, why can't they just be friends? I want to ask you back, well, what does just friends even mean? Because in the 19th century, just friends meant something a whole lot different than it did today. Sometimes it didn't even mean just friends. What we have here is a deeply impactful relationship between 2 women that holds up incredibly well as a queer allegory and defies both in and out of world norms. And gravity, I have to stop. I need one of those shock collars that goes off whenever I make a bad, wicked lyric pun or say they did that song on Glee whenever I hear a song they did on Glee. And even if you're committed to your righteous crusade to defend heterosexual female friendships, Wicked should not be the hill you die on. Do you know what the term friend of Dorothy means? It's gay people. It's code for gay people. You know who Dorothy is? Oh yeah, the girl from The Wizard of Oz, who Elphaba holds hostage for a bit. You remember that whole they literally kiss in the book thing? They literally kiss in the book written by Gregory Maguire, a gay man who said in an interview with Them, the magazine, not the ominous non-binary entity, that the sexual tension between Glinda and Elphaba was intentional and it was modest and restrained and refined in such a way that one could imagine one of these 2 young women had felt more than the other and had not wanted to say it. He also said, or perhaps, because a novelist can't write every scene, perhaps when the lights were out and the novelist was out having a smoke in the back alley, the girls had sex in the bed on the way to the Emerald City. Okay, Gregory. And you know who liked the Instagram post about this interview? Ariana Grande. You know what else Ariana Grande has said in an interview that got turned into an Instagram post? She said, Glinda might be a little in the closet. And you know who commented in agreement on said Instagram post? Kristen Chenoweth. Need I continue? Yes, obviously. Here's an assortment of things that mostly Ariana Grande has said, actually, about their relationship.
There are a select group of fans of L. Frank Baum's original works that do ship Glinda and Elphaba as a couple.
Oh,
I
sure.
bet.
I'm curious, The Boy Is Mine, your song The Boy Is Mine, is there any version of that song which was written about Elphaba and Glinda and their love?
Oh my God!
I couldn't help but
About
wonder.
that.
You know what? Maybe.
There's an
Could
interpretation,
be.
perhaps another remix.
Could be.
I mean, it applies.
Another remix.
It applies.
Yeah.
It applies.
Last
But is
I
it
wanna-
about Elphaba?
Oh,
We don't know.
we
That's a
don't know.
twist.
That's
That
a
is a
twist. A
twist.
good
Just
twist.
saying.
Just saying.
I've heard a
throwing it
lot
out
there.
about some items.
This is sort of the beginning of their true friendship, their first date, shall I say.
mention that a good chunk of the actors in this movie are queer. Cynthia Erivo, Jonathan Bailey, Marissa Bodie, Bowen Yang, Bronwyn James. Michelle Yeoh is at least an honorary gay. So that begs the question. If they kiss in the book, if the author of that book confirms said kiss to be romantic, if both movie Glinda and OG Broadway Glinda affirm a queer interpretation of their character, and if most of the cast is gay anyway, is it queer? If it walks like a gay duck and talks like a gay duck, can you point to it and go, hell yeah, gay duck? Well, at the very least, you can't roll your eyes at people who do. It's one thing to say, I don't personally enjoy the romantic pairing, in which case, yeah, sure, fine. But the culture of God's great internet has made people feel as if they can't just dislike something. They need to prove that it is objectively and morally bad, and no one else should like it. And that's how you get people making up shit like Glinda is a fascist, because they need some sort of justification for their own personal tastes. And then you have people dismissing fans of the pairing as crazy, and the movie itself as not a hashtag real queer movie. And again, I ask, what makes a movie hashtag really queer? I'm not going to argue that Wicked is some kind of groundbreaking work of gay progress, but it does have a long history with a queer community. A real-life bisexual woman starred in a movie with a major theme of marginalization. Of course her experience, and the experiences of half her castmates, impacted the movie. And not to be that person, but it's interesting to note that the same user who made those tweets also made a post about Tony Stark and Steve Rogers from the Marvel movies being canon, and saying if one of them was a girl, they would have kissed in Endgame. I try to stay away from all things Marvel with a 10-foot pole after being embarrassingly obsessed with it in middle school, but I mean, Stony? Really? Not even Stucky? Oh my god, I hate myself. Okay. And this will eventually have to be another video because I have so many thoughts about misogyny in fandom spaces, but there's very obviously a level in which women being queer or queer-coded isn't viewed as subversive or even interesting in the same way that men being queer or queer-coded is, and it makes me feel bad. If you're allowed to call Challengers queer cinema, I'm allowed to say Wicked is about lesbians. Now, the OP did clarify that I hope one day in the future we get to a point where two major characters in a huge blockbuster can just be canonically and unobjectionally queer, and we don't have to consider Wicked queer rep IDK. And I agree with the first part of that sentence. I want that too, but I don't think it's productive to dismiss queer fans who connect with a queer interpretation of a movie that has so much history with their community. There are plenty of movies and TV shows from the 90s, 2000s, and even 2010s that couldn't be explicitly queer due to network regulations or other censorship, and we still consider those queer rep. Think of The Legend of Korra. Think of Xena, Warrior Princess, which I understand is not as important to the cultural zeitgeist as I want it to be, but please think of it anyway. Someone has to. Because remember, Wicked the Musical was produced in 2003, and unlike in the book, they couldn't hide a lesbian kiss in between the throuple and the explosive diarrhea. And I don't know, not to get too doomery, but I do think we might be heading into an era of media where we will have to rely on queer coding and subtext in order to have any representation at all. Just in this, looking at the state of the world and the people doing things. That sucks. I don't know. I don't want that to be the case, but I think it is. But the OP of this discourse is not a bad person at all, and please do not make any tweets on my behalf. I'm so serious, because despite my loud personality and controversial yet correct takes, I actually get really scared when anyone gets mad at me for any reason ever. I'm just trying to use this as an example of, like, why I felt like I had to spend so much time talking about this. Because there are lots of people who will dismiss a queer interpretation of Wicked for no reason, or at least no reason I can figure out. Okay, if you're looking for one big coherent thesis that wraps all this up into a compelling and tidy little bow, I'm not that smart. I just like Wicked and love lesbianism and wanted to talk about the two together through a couple of different lenses. Do I think Wicked is queer? Yes, obviously. Do I think Glinda and Elphaba are going to passionately make out in Wicked the 2V? No. If you ask me on a day I'm feeling really optimistic, I'd say that depending on how much control they give Ariana Grande, we could maybe get some kind of confirmation that Glinda has feelings for Elphaba, but probably not. Like, really, probably not. I mean, you never know. But even if we don't, which again, I really think we probably won't, that doesn't take away from anything queer fans might get out of it. I mean, since when was canon the end-all be-all? 2014 Tumblr, people were out there shipping Elsa with Jack Frost. Those two bitches don't even exist in the same universe. And now you're trying to tell me I can't think the two girls who sing a whole song about their sudden new feelings for each other are fruity? Okay, man, sure. You ride that high horse all the way to the pearly gates of heaven, where God himself will give you a medal for defending the rights of platonic female friends everywhere. Thank you for your service. Did you know that in one short day, the phrase hoi polloi actually comes from ancient Greek? Hoi is the nominative masculine plural article, basically just the word the, and polloi is the nominative masculine plural of polis, which means large or much. So the phrase means the many, or the masses. I'm saying this now, not because it's related to anything else in the video, but because this might be the only time I will ever get any use out of my classics major, ever. So I had to fit it in somewhere. Unlimited, my future is unlimited, and I just had a vision almost like a prophecy. You think I'm singing The Wizard and I, but I'm not. I'm singing Making Good, the song that was originally in the Wicked soundtrack and then was cut and replaced with The Wizard and I tricked you.